Poem by Patrick Starr. Roses are blue, violets are red. I have to go to the bathroom.
How many times I gotta tell you, this is gym class!
Themes are some of the most important aspects in any written work. While it isn't always a priority, and that's fine, the central claim and idea a fictional story presents often ends up forming the very soul of the work in question. Almost every story made by a passionate heart of a human being has something to say, something to communicate, because such is the nature of literature and art in general. Even something as superficially simple, such as, let's say, Dragon Ball, still at its essence carries a core concept that frames and feeds back into the story's events, in this case the never-ending journey towards true strength and self-improvement. One story that has a quite surprising variety and competence within its themes is Kohei Horikoshi's My Hero Academia. I say variety because this series actually has many possible readings to it, with many potential themes being able to be extracted from the text. While we will return to this aspect of Hiroaka at a later date, for today I would like to talk about one specific theme and one specific way Hiroaka elaborates and develops it. These would be systematic abandonment and gentle, respectively. I'll outright say it. Gentle is maybe my favorite villain in all of Hiroaka, only narrowly being beaten by Shigaraki's recent developments, and frankly he's one of my favorite characters in general. His demeanor is fun, his relationship to La Brava is adorable, and his fight against Deku is easily one of the highlights of MHA for me. However, what truly makes him and his arc in general shine is his intrinsic interaction with the themes, message, and concept of My Hero Academia. Danjuro Tobita was, overall, a mediocre student, unable to live up to his high aspirations of becoming a hero known by all. Following a botched impromptu heroic act, he is shunned by both society and his family, receiving death threats and being thrown out of the house, marginalized for his incompetence to the point where even his former friend doesn't recognize or associate with him. In an act of lonesome desperation, he turns his back on dreams of heroism and instead seeks fame and infamy through villainy, Danjuro Tobita vanishing and giving way to the gentle criminal. Similarly, Manami Aiba lived a life cursed by her own power. A quirk that activates upon the expression of romantic feelings, it naturally compelled her to seek closeness and companionship, as everyone naturally gravitates towards that which their power facilitates. But, as a result of that tendency, she kept getting betrayed and disliked, labeled a stalker and a creep. Following this, Manami isolated herself, plunging into a deep depression all the way down to a suicidal rock bottom. But, her soul illuminated by the radiance of a certain dashing rogue, she found purpose again and joined the gentle, taking on the mantle of La Brava. It's quickly noticeable that these two stories share one thing: they were both failed and abandoned by the hero system. Hiroaka's depiction of society goes to great length to ensure that those with clearly visible, flashy potential are given all the opportunities possible. However, this system is consistently shown to fail and ignore the plights of people born under less fortunate conditions, children cursed with cruel or outright detrimental powers. And while the UA students represent the peak of potential and the villains the deepest low of abandonment, there is a middle ground between the two, people who aren't geniuses but who aren't cursed by adversity either, at least not directly. This is the space Gentle and La Brava occupy. They are not prodigies and they are not thugs. They are relatively ordinary people stuck in an unfortunate situation. Due to this, they become a very powerful tool for Hiroaka and Horikoshi, as now the story can move away from extremes like Bakugo and Toga and give insight on how life is for the everyman. Both Gentle and La Brava suffered in relatively mundane ways that inform the reader and the narrative of the neglectful state of hero society and its many consequences. Gentle suffered from society's idolization of heroism and fame. Through earlier encounters with characters like Stain and Mount Lady, the story has already made it very apparent that the noble, self-sacrificial concept of the superhero has long eroded and given way to the capitalistic, superpowered celebrity. The ideal of the hero is put on a pedestal, presented as the ultimate goal to achieve in this superhuman society. And since everyone has a unique power, everyone should aspire to become a great hero, right? This mentality is present from as early as episode 1, when Deku's middle school teacher doesn't bother doing future evaluation since everyone wants to be a hero anyway. But the reality of the matter is that no, not everyone can be All Might. Society wouldn't function if everyone was just a hero. But instead of affirming the worth of non-hero lifestyles and lending guidance to those who have potential in other areas, Hero Society seemingly focuses all its attention and resources towards raising the next generations of heroes and nothing else. Gentle's plight is therefore a consequence of this flawed system. With his elasticity quirk, he could have excelled as a construction safety worker or other less glamorous but important tasks. But because society instilled into him, as it does into everyone, that being a famous hero is the only thing worth aspiring to, he blindly pursues heroism and, when he falls short of the inherent potential and power that profession prefers, plunges into villainy as a last attempt at the fame and glory society told him was the only thing that mattered. Danjiro is by no means innocent in his own misfortune, absolutely not. He didn't seem to try all that hard at school, and he jumped into action without a license, something he knew was wrong and illegal. But then again, so did Deku at the start of the series. And while Deku was granted a unique chance to turn the situation around, Danjiro was left to suffer the consequences of his ineptitude. He had a part in his own fall, but the narrow-minded tenacity that led him to ignore all alternatives was imprinted onto him by a broken system, making him a tragic reminder of how the system only really works for the prodigies, not for the dreamers. Society tells everyone to chase their dreams and hopes, but then does nothing to actually facilitate that pursuit. La Brava, meanwhile, suffered from another vestige of society's neglectfulness, namely its inability to properly educate and guide the myriad of possible quirks that can emerge. Anyone can have any power, and accounting for every possible permutation possible is simply not feasible. However, ideally, structures and services would be put in place to try and offer guidance and advice to kids and their budding powers in a healthy and nurturing manner, as to avoid misdevelopments. And while we do know that quirk counseling exists, we have so far only seen it fail at actually preventing negative developments. Through a later example, we learn that kids are naturally drawn towards testing their powers. And if you're born with a traditionally flashy quirk, then that's great. The system will love you and guide you towards glory. And if you have a boring or useless quirk, life's kinda tough, but I mean, you'll deal. No harm done if you just try using it and see that it's useless. But what if your quirk requires actions that are not socially acceptable? With Manami, she was naturally compelled to seek out human connections, with the type of vigor and youthful obsession something like a superpower would obviously beckon. In a more productive system, she could have been educated on the social ramifications of her quirk. She could have had a healthier relationship to her power and a more positive understanding of what it means for her as a person. Likewise, other students around her could have been informed and educated on the different quirk conditions and situations. But none of that happened. Instead, she was left to be ostracized and shunned for her natural curiosity, causing her to believe that her very existence was inherently something flawed, something to ridicule, and something that didn't deserve to be. The system would rather simply pretend quirks are mostly cool, simple powers like fire breathing and telekinesis, instead of acknowledging and caring for the more complicated, socially impactful abilities. It's easier to pretend that everyone can either just shoot fire or shoot lightning than to actually admit that some powers are kind of messed up and need special care. We see this with La Brava and later with Toga, indicating that this is by no means not an isolated phenomenon, but rather a fundamental issue with the system, a system that, in this case, abandoned La Brava. These two stories by themselves already present the inherent flaws of the hero system and fulfill that purpose very well. But it's once these two characters are pitted against our protagonist, Deku, that Hero Aka truly opens up to some really juicy societal criticism and injustice. The true beauty of this encounter is that, because Gentle and La Brava aren't exactly evil, the story invites the reader to see this fight from both perspectives. And just like how it enables two potential scenarios, of either rooting for Deku or for Gentle, it also enables two readings, two interpretations of the same fight that complement each other. Let's start with Deku's side first. As Gentle lays defeated before him, he states that this was the hardest battle he has ever fought. This line sparked some surprise among the reader base when it first released, since just in his last fight, Deku had his body literally pulled apart repeatedly in order to destroy a megalomaniacal kaiju hell-bent on destroying and destabilizing all of society. So why would tussling with a bouncy YouTuber in order to prevent the cancellation of a school festival be anywhere comparable, let alone harder? Well, this statement is, firstly, a re-establishment of Hiroaka's core tenet regarding stakes. While it is less bombastic, fundamentally, Culture Festival and Overhaul are both about the same thing: saving Eri. In Hiroaka's interpretation, the salvation of Eri's emotionality and smile is in no way less important and impactful than saving her physically from the clutches of a violent abuser. And this extends to the entire series. Its stakes are less about destruction and global peril, but about personal development, emotionality, and dreams. My Hero Academia isn't about the impact of explosions and laser beams, but about the weight of personal expectations, dreams, and hopes, and this line reflects that. And secondly, the reason the fight against Gentle was harder on Deku is connected to this tenet as well. Gentle forced Deku to grow up, in a sense. Until now, Deku's fights have always either been idealistic bouts against his classmates in an attempt to grow alongside each other, or vicious struggles against irredeemable evils who, in the name of justice and safety, had to be stopped. Deku just kept smashing his way towards creating and protecting smiles. This time, however, things are different. Gentle isn't evil, he isn't even all that dangerous, and his plan is a crime in only the most marginal sense. Moreover, his story and motivation is incredibly similar to Deku's, and quite honestly, very understandable. The pain of mediocrity in a society that expects excellence is something Deku understands very well after all. In a way, Gentle is just like Deku, a dreamer hoping to bring about smiles on the faces of those he cares about. But because of how the world is, one of them has to fail. There has to be a victor, and there has to be a loser. This is a situation in which Deku's naive view of heroism is forced to mature. He cannot simply keep talking about bringing smiles and happiness, because the reality of the matter is that in order to protect the smiles he cares about and to achieve his dreams, he will have to stop those of others dead in its tracks. Some smiles can only be created by destroying the smiles of someone else. It isn't fair, it isn't just, but it simply is how the world works sometimes, as a result of a deeply rooted inequality and a flawed system. Realizing this is an important but immensely hard step for Deku, which makes this the hardest fight he's ever fought. If we turn towards the other side of the conflict, we get Gentle and La Brava desperately struggling to achieve their goals, to bring about Gentle's infamy and glory in a society that didn't want him. Interesting to note here is how Gentle says that he wants his story to inspire others. This is the exact same motivation Deku has: to save people from desperation in their own lack of ability, to show them that even someone who is born without a quirk or who didn't excel at school can have a bright future. Gentle even has a direct example of him inspiring someone, namely La Brava, who he indirectly saves from suicide. Their desperate pursuit of happiness is fueled by reasons that are very well known not just by their adversary but the readers as well. However, this is where a hefty portion of irony comes in. Both Gentle and La Brava seek fame and glory because they want to both feel happy in their own existence and inspire those struggling in similar ways. But they already found the happiness they sought in each other. Gentle wanted to be seen, to have his competence, drive, and existence be acknowledged and appreciated. And that is exactly what La Brava does, as she admires and celebrates Gentle's ingenuity and class. Meanwhile, La Brava sought to have her feelings and existence be accepted and to be given a purpose. Which coincidentally is what Gentle does, as he accepts her into his life and seeks to honor and protect her feelings, even making dark Sharpie rings around his eyes his trademark to make La Brava feel better about the dark rings around her eyes, reminders of her depression, a depression Gentle happily and positively integrates into her personal journey. In short, they had everything they wanted, found in their love and care for each other, but the thirst to live up to society's expectations instilled by the hero system made them both blind to it. And it is this that's the realization that hits Gentle in those last moments of the fight. The happiness he sought wasn't something any amount of notoriety was going to give him, but rather a joy derived from a genuine human connection. His pursuit of glory did not only blind him, but it also implicated the one person he loves into a crime, potentially tarnishing her bright future. He may have inspired her, yes, but he inspired her into a lifestyle of criminality. A far cry from the inspiration he wants to be, and the inspiration Deku already is to people like Koda, whom he inspires to become a hero, not a villain. And so, in an act of true kindness, he chooses to forsake his dream and interrupt the fight, allowing the festival to continue and for La Brava to not be incriminated. This duo is many things. Adorable, entertaining, and appealing. But more than just that, Gentle and La Brava represent the deeply harmful consequences of a system that is only concerned with greatness and glory, but doesn't pay any heed to what those expectations and structures do to the regular, average person. They are reminders of the fragile nature of the self-image, of the right to dream and to pursue. They are manifestations of the pain associated with systemic abandonment, which itself feeds back into one of Hiroaka's most central themes, the demystification of hero society as a utopia. But they are also an example of how to escape that vicious cycle, of how human connections and emotions can provide joy and happiness in a world obsessed with reserving dreams and ambition only for the best of the best. In the end, one could say, the answer truly was as simple as a single word: love.